Hey guys, welcome back to Sober Sitdown. Tonight we have a very, very special guest coming in from California, Mr. Robert LaSardo. Robert has been seen in many motion pictures since the late 80s. He's been in his acting career. Originally from Brooklyn, New York. He was in very famous scenes of CSI Miami, NYPD Blue, and Nip Tuck. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert LaSardo.
I'm here to give you a warning.
Those who commit violence against others.
Souls plunge into a river of boiling blood. Kill them now.
Who did you kill?
Someone innocent. I don't really scare that way, you know, the whole in-your-face staring thing.
Can't kill me. You can burn me, you can shoot me, but you can't kill me!
You got a wife, Memo.
At home. In Nicaragua.
Then you understand my position.
Yeah, I think you showed me that. You and that other cop. Why are you here?
I'm here to give you a warning, Memo.
A warning. Mira, a mala noche. I'm untouchable.
Untouchable, just like your dead friends at the Biscayne house? Somebody killed them all today, except Riaz. I may be able to help keep you alive in here.
This is a good book, Mr. Alvarado. Which circle of hell would you be in?
7th, the outer one.
Those who commit violence against others.
Souls plunge into a river of boiling blood.
I tell you when you're done. If you don't do what I've asked you politely to do, I'll take this hand back to Colombia with me. And then your family will learn what it means to be hungry.
I can't help you if I don't understand what I'm feeling.
I killed them, man.
Who did you kill?
Someone innocent.
And how can I help you?
The day that I died, I was going to find the family of the man that I killed, and I was going to beg for forgiveness. I want to see that through now. With you.
15 blade.
Sean!
You of all people know I can't use this thing.
Pussy. Truth is, Sean, I made you a man.
You didn't do shit.
I gave you the guts to pull a gun. I gave you the strength to risk killing someone to save yourself and your family and your business. I gave you character. Now what's with this music? I hate this shit. Now that's more like it. Gargoyle of the 80s.
Turn that down. I can't operate under these conditions.
Hey, you think fixing her face is gonna make everything better? You wanna restore real order to this mess, Sean? You gotta be ready to go one-on-one with the carver. Like you did with me. Oh, I think she needs some more gas.
No, I won't do that again.
Yes, you will. Because you got a death wish. So repressed. Our little Sean. You gotta take this guy out. Restore the order and kill the carver. Kill the carver. Don't tell me this guy scares you more than me. I'm getting jealous.
Shut up!
Make me.
Done.
Good. Ready? Aim.
Robert, thanks for coming out once again for tonight. You just did a recent motion picture with a friend of mine, Ciro Dapagio, in The Mob King.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward. I was blessed to be part of. Ciro brought me on with a team of podcasters to see the movie prior to release, and I can't wait for it to hit the public eye. I know you guys are just out at the AMC movie conference, and I hope for good things for you guys for that.
Thank you.
So Robert, you were born in Brooklyn, and your younger years. Who was Robert LaSardo? What led you up into acting?
I'm not quite sure who Robert LaSardo is. I guess I'm a creative type. And when I was a young man, I had a teacher who was very influential in my life and made some suggestions in terms of vocation. And I trusted this teacher, so I did what was required of me. And next thing I know, I'm standing on a stage affecting people. So I remember what that felt like compared to living in what people conceive as the real world. I remember feeling safe on stage. And I remember seeing the reactions of my classmates. And it was astonishing to me to see how I could affect people with something that I wasn't aware of in terms of the mechanics of theater or plays and what's required to perform on stage. You don't just go up there and stare at people. You go up there with a responsibility to convey the playwright's literature, the character, the dialogue, and inhabit that space realistically, so that the audience can have an escapism, a way to watch something and be moved by it. Ultimately, I didn't realize I had that ability until people pointed it out to me. So yeah. I guess in that sense, if I have to label myself, ask me who Robert LaSardo is, I don't know. I guess I'm an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. What part of Brooklyn were you born in, and is that where you were raised in Brooklyn?
I was born in Coney Island Hospital, which is in Brooklyn. I remember moving around a lot. I lived in Brooklyn for the first, 8 to 10 years of my life, and then we left Brooklyn to go other places because there wasn't a lot of stability, so we had to kind of get creative in how we lived. I lived in a car for a while. We lived in the woods. I lived in a tent. We went up the Hudson River upstate to a place called Croton Harmon. So, for a period of time in my younger life, like I said, between, from when I was born up until about 10 years old, I lived in various neighborhoods. I lived in South Brooklyn. I lived in downtown Brooklyn. I lived in places like that. I don't know if are you familiar with the different sections of Brooklyn?
Not really. I was in a section a couple weeks, 2 weeks ago. I met a friend, who's from Ozone Park, Queens. We somehow, some way got in the Brooklyn section. I think it's called Brownsville. Is that a section of Brooklyn?
Yes. Yeah.
I was in a section called Brownsville, which wasn't the greatest part of town. We got on a subway and then we went into Manhattan to go to Little Italy. So that's the only time I've ever stepped foot in Brooklyn. It was 2 weeks ago when I was outside of the subway. I believe it was like Utica Avenue or somewhere around that area.
Yeah. I know where that is.
Grant Avenue. That's where Grant Avenue is actually the subway station we were in. But so you were bouncing around like around.
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid, man. I mean, the family situation was quite fragmented, and there wasn't a lot of money, and there wasn't a lot of consistency in terms of the structures of what people consider conventional families. So, it was a bit of a, I don't know, maybe a bit turbulent, but I enjoyed the time I had to walk around and I discovered the freight train yards when I was about 7 years old. When I was in third grade, I just found myself wandering on the train tracks, trying to jump a freight train to get out of there, man. And then when that wasn't happening, I just kind of rolled with the circumstances. And like I said, I found myself with the people that were looking after me, just in different places,
Yeah, that's
So the genesis of my life, is Brooklyn. But then, we moved around a lot.
it's very inspiring. I guess it's got its pros and cons. I mean, it made you the person you are today, and you're a very creative person, good actor, and I feel as though that when people go through different types of scenarios in their life, it builds them into the character that they are today, and gives you the personal traits that you have today.
Yeah, there's a saying that I'm not saying this applies to my life, but I remember this saying. When you just said that, I thought of this saying that best parents sometimes, how does the saying go? Sometimes the best parents are the worst parents, and the worst parents are the best because they leave you to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I guess maturing at a young age too, and really builds you some strong life skills as life goes on.
I don't know about life. Yeah, well, that's, we're jumping ahead, but I'm just talking about the personality dynamic. I'm talking about how parents can sometimes influence their children, even in what might be perceived as an ideal situation. The child is brainwashed into a fundamental belief that has nothing to do with its individuated cause. Sometimes the parents don't allow the child to be uniquely that happening. They create ego children. They want them to be extensions of themselves, their own tendencies, their own beliefs, their own fundamentals. So the child is robbed of their identity. So sometimes when the parent is absent psychologically because of a mental illness or for whatever, any number of reasons, it allows the child room to explore. That discovery is authentic. It's real. At times maybe it's, turbulent, but it still allows the child discovery that is uniquely born out of adversity. So the character that is developed is uniquely that person's. It's not been given to them. They're not programmed. They figure things out quickly on their own out of necessity to survive.
Yeah, that's real. That's real powerful stuff. I never really even looked at it like that. I mean, the only thing that I came close to ever looking at it from that side of the spectrum was like, you see, like I have a kid who's 7 right now, and I see now that she's getting a little a little older, she's getting into organized sports. And I seen it when I was a kid playing sports, stuff like that too. Is like you said, a lot of parents live through their children, not allowing the child to make their own identity or make, like learn things on their own. And sometimes that could be not good for a child, because sometimes you're putting a kid under pressure, trying to make them into somebody that they're not as well. So I couldn't agree with you more on that one. That's really powerful stuff. I never even looked at it the way you put it into words, but I understand.
It's a blessing.
It is. Yeah, I mean that made you who you are today. Now you were saying that you had a teacher who was very strongly influential to you, to have you pursue your career in acting. And I see here, you went to high school at a performing arts in New York City. So how old were you say, when this teacher kind of took you under your wing and, put you into you led into that path of going to that high school?
I couldn't have been more than 15 years old when I was accepted to performing arts. And I met Anthony Abeson soon after. He was my teacher in school, and then became my friend, my close friend and mentor and surrogate father. I mean, I can go down a checklist of things that he filled in the gaps for me.
So like junior high, prior to going to high school there and stuff like that, at that point, what you like pretty much just living a kind of an average normal lifestyle where you were just...
I don't know what normal me is, and I don't know what average is. I do know that I was distracted a lot since I was in second or third grade up until the time you're describing. I was restless. I was disruptive. I could not function in traditional classrooms. I was thrown out of school quite often because of some of the stuff I experienced in my household when I was a little boy. So I don't know about average. I don't know about normal. I just know that I didn't feel a sense of belonging in terms of being properly fitted in a situation of school that made sense until high school for performing arts, because the school was designed in such a way that it defied conventional structures and allowed the spirit of the young man or young woman to explore and be free. It wasn't as rigid as some of the traditional structures that I felt locked up in and could not hold me. I was always breaking out, running away. I had been thrown away when I was a little kid, so I got used to running away. And so school was no different. The patriarch or matriarch of the teacher, from the perception I was, or the subjective position I was observing, made no sense to me. I couldn't hear them, and I couldn't relate to my classmates. It was all just white noise. I lived in another world inside my head. So I could not relate to most people, more than when I was young and probably even now.
So
that's why I think the art form, the creative art form, is so crucial to people like me, because it provides you an opportunity to have a relationship with things that maybe make more sense in the fiction than they do in the so-called real life.
Yeah, it's once again, that's some pretty powerful stuff. That's a very unique concept of, the way you put it, but it's kind of it's a little bit more understanding of how you're explaining it as well. I think where the question comes into play is that the traditional structured type of junior high, like, what led you into, like, you went from, you said, failing to adapt and traditional structure schooling. Where all of a sudden did it come into play to get accepted into
I
this
wouldn't say I
performance?
failed to adapt. I would say I resisted the programming. I did not fail. They failed.
Okay.
I was just a reflection of a circumstance that was beyond my control. I didn't ask for the life I was born into. I was just thrown into it and adapted. So I didn't fail. I adapted. It's, the people around me didn't understand. So it's not about blame. It's simply about some people have just a different way of looking at things than, the collective.
Yeah, I understand. And sorry if I put it that way. I didn't
No, there's nothing to apologize about. I just wanted to clarify
yeah.
that I did
Okay.
not fail. I just did not, I resisted because I knew something was wrong. There was something wrong at home. There was something in the schools I went to. There was something wrong in the way that other kids communicated the fundamentals of their indoctrination and the programming of brainwashing that the parents brainwashed them with. I couldn't identify. And then, throughout the years, I finally discovered a situation where there were other kids similar to me that came from situations that maybe were a little bit like fragmented, and found art as a way to deal with a lot of the confusion that came about because of the things I described. It was catharsis. It was a way to work through the sense of being ill-placed everywhere you went. So on stage, I felt at home. And within the works of playwrights who've written great works, who suffered or had went through similar things, I could identify with the literature. I could identify with the stories. I could identify with the mythos. Tennessee Williams, George Bernard Shaw. There's incredible playwrights that wrote works that spoke to me more than anything I, could hear in the everyday world, everyday doings of conventional life. And Anthony Abeson, my teacher in performing arts, was an incredibly insightful, spiritual, kind of bodhisattva type presence that awakened my consciousness so that I could see that I was not crazy. I was just outnumbered.
Yeah, and I feel bad, to backpedal a little bit. I broke one of my golden rules is like, I hate using the word normal, and I don't know why I described your situation as the word. I don't that word normal. I always say is normal is based upon somebody else's perception of what they feel as though is right and wrong, rather than what we feel as though is right or wrong. So the word normal really shouldn't exist in a vocabulary. And I can't believe I broke my golden rule in using that word normal, because I normally don't use it.
It's okay, man. I've been breaking all sorts of rules my entire life. It's okay. You're in good company.
So, like I said, you got led into the high school of performing arts. I guess what got you acquainted into getting into that school from where you were?
In junior high school, there was a teacher. I went to a specialized junior high school for kind of misfitted kids that couldn't function in the traditional curriculum. So there was a teacher, an English teacher, that taught acting as an elective. And she watched me perform, and she was the one that whispered in my ear the idea of auditioning for the high school for performing arts, because you had to audition to get in. I think every year there were 2,000 applicants, and they accepted 70. So what was required was 2 contemporary monologues. So I found a couple of plays, read them. I went through, sifted through several, and then I found a couple that made sense to me in terms of subject. And I studied the monologues, and I auditioned, and I got in.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about the performing arts school, but for the things that I did read about it, it's not just something you could sign up for and just go to. You really have to be gifted and talented to, like you said, they have requirements and
I think the requirement is effort and discipline. It's like if you want to play the piano, you have to practice. If you want to be good in sports, you have to practice. For some reason, people think that, I guess maybe Hollywood is the culprit behind this. I don't know who the culprit is. But there just seems to be this illusion that based on appearance that don't necessarily have to do the work. You can just appear and look a certain way, and next thing you know, you're off to delusions of grandeur, and there's a camera in front of you. But the reality of it is, from what I know and what I was taught, was that you have to, just like a carpenter has to, figure out the physics of carpentry, or a mechanic has to understand what's under the hood, et cetera, et cetera. You have to. The craft of acting is no different. You have to study. You have to break down the text in the script or the screenplay or the play. There is character analysis. There's a science behind it that is required, and you learn it and you practice it. And people who are teachers in this discipline observe you and see whether or not you've done your homework, and they base their evaluations on your ability to manifest the disposition, the fantasy, or whatever it is that you're doing. They have, like, if you sing a song, right, you have to sing it well, and not, you got to hit the notes right. If you don't hit the note right, then they know you don't practice, or you don't have the ability, or you haven't been practicing enough. It's the same thing when you stand before the teachers at Performing Arts High School, and they evaluate your audition to see if you have the ability, or you're at the level of natural ability or an inclination to do the work, and the potential is there, or you don't. And whether it's that or it's auditioning for movies and television, I don't know if that's always the case in the marketplace of Hollywood, because a lot of it relies or hinges on the appearance of things, because it's a visual medium. So you may not necessarily know you may not have to be able to play the piano so well or be a great carpenter, but if you look good doing it, then you got the job. So there's a kind of a paradox functioning that's present within the entertainment industry. And I think that's why so many people feel or believe that they can do it, because they look a certain way without doing the actual work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think there is probably that false image of some people says, "Oh, I look like I can be in a movie," but like, can you be in a movie? I guess is what the real question is.
But what's the criteria, man? It all depends on who you're standing in front of. If it's an independent film that requires character development and authenticating that character in a realistic way, you can't fake it. You're given the material by the writer, and the writer expects you to lift the dialogue off the page and manifest it in three-dimensional form and affect him emotionally or her emotionally, because you believe in what you're saying. It's the level of belief that transforms you into that. And if you don't believe in it, then you're just faking it. It's like, someone faking an emotion. You can tell they're not really there. And then other instances where they just require someone to look pretty and go through a ritualized practice physically of doing things to entice the audience, then there's not much required. It all depends on who you're standing in front of and what's required. Yeah.
So, yeah, after high school, it says that you joined the Navy, which thank you. We're on our Veterans Day week, and thank you for being a veteran. Appreciate that. What inspired you to join the Navy after high school?
Death. I remember a man, and I'm not trying to sound morbid or anything, it was just the realization that if I didn't make extreme changes in the way I was living, that I wasn't going to live for very long. There were friends of mine that I grew up with back in 1970s Brooklyn that was very different than it is now. Even though I know it's turning again and becoming not such a good place, it still was quite a violent place when I grew up in it. So I saw the destructive tendencies manifesting in my own life and others around me. And it was ironic that I was able to utilize the stage and performing arts to work through some of that conflict as a man that most men battle with, that live in situations that are violent or turbulent. I wasn't able to completely transcend and overcome. So I realized that I didn't leave New York City or not place myself in a situation where I needed to learn discipline and regiment, almost like become my own policeman, that I would probably, ruin my life, because I saw, like I said, other friends of mine who were catching cases, going to jail, getting into trouble, doing things. And so I was lost. But I always felt that I would survive if I had the courage to recognize that death was coming. Someone once said to me, if you can see your death coming, get off the track, man. Don't wait till it's right there and it's too late. So I felt that there was crisis around me, or that I was the crisis, and that something, like I said, extreme had to be done. I had to implement this policeman, my own policeman, because I stood before a judge, got into trouble, and I was pardoned. I was given the biggest gift of my life when she said to me, whatever she said to me, which was that I don't ever want to see you here again. So my fate could have been very different had she made a different decision, and I would have not been able to do anything. I would not have been able to complete high school nor go into the military, but I would have went upstate to juvie. So I caught a break, and that opened my eyes, and I realized that after high school I needed to join the military as a condition to stay on the right path and be forced to do it, because there was this, I don't know, there was something going on with me that just, I don't know what it was. This, I don't know, this temptation, this tendency, this conflict, whatever it is, that was like a gravitational field pulling me toward things that were not good for me. Once I joined the military and I went through boot camp and did all that and was forced to get in line and get my mind right, and realized that I had to grow up and not behave like some Neanderthal, that I had a natural ability, apparently, according to what others told me, and that I also, the only thing that was missing was discipline and focus. So I needed, before I could venture off into whatever creative endeavors that later on came in life, I had to master other aspects of my being, discipline, responsibility, letting go of certain beliefs and fixations that, like I said, were leading me the wrong way. So I think no matter how creative my ability was, I still needed to balance it out with other aspects of my personality. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter how gifted I was or am. I would have destroyed myself. So the military saved my life in that sense, because it taught me to follow through. It taught me consequences. It taught me to respect authority. It taught me to get in line. And I did. And I'm grateful for the experience. And I got to travel the world and see all sorts of things that really expanded my consciousness outside the tiny zip code of Brooklyn and New York City, man. I was born again through the military. And then when I returned, I reacquainted with my acting teacher and picked up where I left off, because I had a handle on the other stuff now. I was ready to commit to the discipline of the creative arts and not allow my temperament to get in my way.
So when you were in the military, did you I think I was never in the military, so I don't really have obviously the experience that you have, but in the military, usually you have an assignment, like you have a job in the military or you study something in the military. Was there anything in particular when you were with the Navy for 4 years that you had a particular job or something particular that you studied while in the Navy?
I worked with attack dogs. I was a police officer. I was an MP. I was a master at arms. I was sent to Lackland Air Force Base to get certified with attack dogs and drug dogs. I was stationed in a listening post below Siberia during the Cold War, and I did perimeter watches. I searched planes. I arrested people. I, we played war games because, back in those days during the Cold War, the belief was that if the Russians invaded, they would come down through the Aleutian Islands. So there was these bases, the Aleutian chain, they called it. Adak was the island I was stationed on. And it was an air base with planes that were designed to track Russian submarines. So we were watching them, they were watching us. So it's basically, military police. And, and I work with dogs. Canine unit.
That's nice. Yeah, that's cool. It's something different. I've never heard. That's something different. I haven't heard of. A couple of my friends were in the Navy. They were Seabees and they were in doing construction and stuff like that. But that's something different I never heard of before, and I'm glad you shared that. So then you got back from the Navy, and then that's when you went to the Stella Adler Studio of Acting?
Yeah, I reacquainted with Anthony Abeson after I was discharged from the Navy, and then he suggested a couple of things. He had a friend over at the Actor Studio named David Heislip, who was in charge of the Working Observer program at the Actor Studio in New York City. So I would go there and work, like paint, clean up, custodial work. And in exchange, they would let me sit and watch members of the Actor Studio perform. And then he also recommended that I, study at Stella Adler. So I did. I went to that school, studied their method, studied Stanislavski, the interpretive aspect of it from the point of view of Lee Strasberg, his school. I was there, clearly after he had passed away, but a lot of people were carrying the torch of his fundamentals. Ellen Burstyn, Robert De Niro was there, Christopher Walken taught there, Lee Grant, an assortment of extremely talented people were present at the studio when I was there, and I got to watch them. And it was inspiring to see them because I had only seen them in the movies, and when I was in the military, it was the furthest thing from my mind that I would be in a position to observe something creatively on that level.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd only been out of the military maybe less than a year, and I was sweeping the steps at the Actor Studio. I felt like I was, the custodian for Mount Olympus or something. Like I had been anointed blessed with this amazing job to sweep the steps and clean the bathrooms, paint them. It was like I felt blessed to be able to do that. I never felt that way when I was in the military doing some of the jobs I did because they were kind of ugly, and I'm not proud of it. But when I got back to New York and I went forward into the New York situation, it was just like, wow. It was surreal to go from one extreme and then to the other.
Yeah, I'm sure that was mind-blowing and eye-opening. I mean, that's, an opportunity of a lifetime to witness, some of the people that you said, right in front of you, teaching and, observing. Some of those guys are, legends, you made a famous quote at one time that movies saved your life. Could you break that down a little bit?
Sure, Scott. I think maybe I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of people find refuge in fantasy, escapism, because sometimes life seems to fall short of what we hoped for, you know. So we check out, we go and watch a movie. And I was doing that at a very young age because I was, you know, left at movie theaters, or I would wander into movie theaters when I was a kid, and I just felt safe there. And I would just disappear into the fantasy, and it wasn't a fantasy, it felt real. And when your life around you seems surreal because it seems to be defined by chaos, then you look for refuge in somewhere, someplace. I found refuge, like I said, in the train yards, you know, hopping boxcars, hoping that they would take me to some magical place away from where I was. The movies did the same thing. They took me away to some magical place, or they, you know, when I was younger, it was fantasy, you know, the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, you know, Sinbad on his ship traveling the world, you know, going to, you know, exciting, mysterious places and encountering all sorts of bizarre things. It was a way to just leave the world behind because the world didn't make sense, but the movies did. They were, you know, like I guess for the fundamentalists that go to church or synagogue or temple or whatever, the ashram, they find a sense, maybe they experience a sense of equanimity or deliverance. Their consciousness is relieved of all the burdens of everyday life. I felt the same thing with films. It was like a spiritual experience almost. And as I got older, and my palette for entertainment became more dynamic, you know, I required other types of storytelling to escape into. And so it's just, I've been in that sense. So yeah, it saved my mind, which in turn saved my life. You know, it saved my mind. The imagination, I saw the power of the imagination, how you could redefine existence, and that reality as had been taught to me and other people may have not been true. Clearly, physics and science, from the conventional point of view, are real. Gravity is real 24/7, right? You drop an object, it hits the ground. But I don't know if we define the being of man based on formulas like that. It kind of limits the spirit and the heart and keeps you grounded from being able to move into other, I don't know, possibilities with your imagination, that there are no limitations. You know, you can fly. And if you believe it, you can within the frame of fiction. And then fiction becomes reality when you're doing it. You know, I'm not suggesting that people should stand on a roof and jump off and see if they can fly. Like I said, there's some basic fundamentals in this world that are very concrete, but I don't think they offer mankind any hope because it's just the mechanics, the matrix. When you start to open the door of imagination and go in there and don't identify with your physical body so much, but the aspect of the imagination that can create all sorts of worlds, and you can have multiple experiences as a personality, as a character, and that's what, you know, the playwrights do. That's what they do in movies all the time. They're playing God. They're inventing worlds and genres of fiction for people to escape into. You know, I want to go off into space, so they have movies for people who want to fly off into space. You have Star Wars for people who want to, you know, who are fascinated with the degradation of humanity. You have horror, the tearing apart of the human experience. For people who have an affection for God, you have faith-based genre. For people who want to laugh their troubles away, you have comedy. There's all these different categories that provide humanity like a drug, a way to kind of check out. And I'm no different in that sense. I used it psychologically as a way to heal my mind. And I realized that there was this special door within my psyche, the imagination, that I could open and go step through it. And I did not have to define my existence based on the formulas that people have been programmed to believe as concrete, hard fact reality. You know, every artist knows that 2 + 2 = 5. You know, because it doesn't make sense from the point of view of science. It's entertainment is absurd. It's ridiculous. Because basically what Hollywood is doing, or anyone who embarks on that journey, is basically taking something that's not real and convincing you that it is.
Yeah, I mean, so would you say like the movies that they take you out of a place, or did they take you away from somewhere you no longer want it to be?
Yeah, they
Or,
took me away from me.
yeah, but it took you to a place that you want it to be.
They took me away from me.
Okay.
I did not feel comfortable always within the patterning of my thoughts. Thoughts would arise. I'd see the world a certain way. It seemed hopeless at times. People weren't always nice. When I was tattooed in the 1980s, it wasn't popular back then. So I had to find ways to escape the town with the torches and those running after me with judgment. So I had to come to terms with that. The programming that lived inside this mind wasn't mine. It had been given to me by other people. It wasn't me that I was hearing. And so I think I had to work through that. And like I said, I think theater, drama, class, playing certain types of characters and all that, and being appreciated by other artists who utilize the art form as a way to overcome and transcend and exercise these demons was useful, like tremendously useful in that sense. The movies saved my life, and the practice of the art form itself helped me create this kind of this catharsis, the psychological refuge, the psychological practice to work through.
So would you say like when you were in your, kind of inside of, acting, would you say that kind of brought you into like at ease and more in your comfort zone?
Yeah, for a period of time, it seemed to provide me with a sense of belonging. I realized there was something that I could do that was not destructive, and others appreciated, and it made me feel good. And I don't think there's much. I think if you ask about anything more from life, you're not being reasonable. To be able to have a job to do that you like, and work with people that understand where you're coming from. On the artistic end, because it seems like there's been some artists that I've met that have also come from very challenging circumstances, and they use the art form as well as a way to deal with those feelings, to go deeper into them, to take a look at them. And then there are certain writers that allow you that opportunity to create psychodrama in front of the camera, so that you can, like an exorcism, you can release it in a healthy way. You don't do it with addiction. You talked earlier about addiction, right? So you find a constructive way to come to terms with negative input that you were given early in life, or whatever, by whomever, whatever. And you use the art form as a way to productively strengthen a way of seeing that is not bleak. And you also see that it affects other people. And so that you realize, I'm making a contribution. You may not always enjoy the fruits of your contribution, because I don't walk around observing myself in that sense. I don't even recognize sometimes the contribution I've made until people point it out to me. Oh man, I really loved this movie you were in, or this show. I'm not thinking about it all the time. I'm either working on new projects and studying and maintaining the disciplines of what's required by my vocation, so that I can continue to do a good job. So the best I can say is that while I'm doing the work, while I'm rehearsing or performing with other actors, the rest of the world, the everyday world, seems to disappear. And the fiction becomes the more dominant reality. and what appears to be reality becomes the fiction. And I think a lot of artists, some artists recognize this, and that's why transitioning back can be kind of difficult. Some people want to stay there forever. They don't want to ever come out. And that's why you hear stories about, certain artists who go really deep into character, sometimes have psychological problems in their personal lives.
That's so funny because when you were it's not funny, but I was just taking notes as you were talking because there were many things that you said, and I learned the best way to do it is write down as you go. I want to go back into what you were saying about the addiction in relation to what you were talking about. But first, I want to speed ahead to ask that thing, the thing that you just said. I actually wrote pretty much verbatim down exactly what you were saying, and it was kind of a question that I had for you actually because of how I can see how you're like passionate about, you were saying that you got to make, if you're a good actor, in order to be a good actor, you got to make people want to believe, well, not, you don't want to have to, you have to want to live and have that paper transmit into a third dimensional, having the watcher believe what you're acting, and that would probably mean getting into character. And the question I was going to have to ask you is there's many TV series and many movies that you appeared in, and I wanted to ask you, was there ever a time that you felt as though that you enjoyed being within that character so much that when the project was done it was difficult to let go of it?
Yes. Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. It all depends on what it was. Some experiences I had in Hollywood or within the mainstream in the series were very challenging, and I could not wait for it to be over with. And I think the reason I could not wait for it to be over with was because, like any job, sometimes you find yourself working with people that are not very nice. And despite what audiences think, maybe people think that all actors get along, or that when you're on a show together, everybody's happy and you have to work, you go have drinks, and there's this kind of team, this team spirit, but it's not always the case. At least it wasn't for me. So there were times when I just could not wait to be done with it, and there were other times that I lamented a bit afterwards. It was like, wow, I'm gonna miss that. That was fun. I had a good time doing that. They were nice to me, and some of the colleagues, I don't call them friends because I don't think there are any friends in my business. They're colleagues, and you can be friendly, but I don't think by mere design that the industry is created to induce friendships. It's a competitive field. So if you can find one friend in the midst of it who is secure enough in themselves, then good. So it's of the miraculous. But aside from that, answer your question, yes, there were times when it was difficult to leave and difficult to stay.
Okay, I can understand that, and I like how you put turning a negative into a positive, where the negative portion of the negative aspects of what happened, throughout anyone's life, including your own, you can take a left or a right hand turn at any time, and by you going into acting, you took that negative and you made it into a positive for yourself, which I commend you for.
Thank you.
I can relate to that because where I wasn't traditionally growing up, I wasn't a guy that went to high school parties and on the weekends and was getting involved in drugs and alcohol. I was a hockey player. I was really big into playing hockey, and I was into fixing up cars. I lived a sober life through high school. I didn't go to the parties and stuff like that like people would think because of my sobriety stories that I've told on this show. I got into the alcohol portion and dabbling with other things after high school, when I started getting into the club scene in the late or the early 2000s, late 90s. The club scene was a thing. I got into that. I was introduced to alcohol, which in turn, the way that I was introduced how to drink alcohol, not for enjoyment rather than effect, turned me into a different person that I never was. I had some things happen to me when I was in my childhood that I had held inside for quite some time, and the alcohol kind of took me out of the comfort zone of myself, and I felt like I can do anything. When I drank that alcohol and I was not in the reality of misery anymore, it took me away from the place that I didn't want to be in anymore, and it took me into a place that I could forget about how I felt deep down, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. It's pretty basic.
And
It's escapism.
And I feel as though that when I started living that life, and I lived it for 10, 11 years, and things progressively got worse, I was feel as though that I took a negative and made it into another negative. But now taking and converting that, what I learned from that life that I chose to live for quite some time, I took the negative of that and I turned it into a positive by trying to influence people, coming on here, doing projects like this, to influence people to take that negative and put it into a positive. It's never too late to make a change, and no matter how rough your road is, at the end of it, you can go left or right. Sometimes we choose the left and we get a little off track, but you can always still make that right to get back on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is the lesson of mercy. This is mercy that you're describing, I think, because there's no future in judgment.
Yeah, and I feel as though we can only learn from our mistakes. We can't not that you can't keep reliving them, because I always believe in replaying the tape to remind me where I came from, to not take me back to where I once was. But I feel as though that don't hold on to your past to the point that it conflicts with your future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been communicated many times to many people who've struggled. The difficulty is that the knowledge is one thing, the practice is something else. You have to practice, which is hard. You can philosophize the steps, you can philosophize, all of it. But if you don't do the work, you're just hallucinating. You're imagining it. You have to actually take action and transcend the past tendencies. If you don't, even thinking what you give attention to brings things into being. So it requires a shift in attention away from which I got to look this way instead of that way. And if the tendency is always to look that way, then the physics of mere attention create destiny. If you think about something a lot, give it a lot of energy, thoughts arise, and then usually actions follow. So you have to divert attention, and that can be difficult. The shift, the discipline that's required to shift your attention away and change the tendency, overcome the tendency and the patterning, can take an entire lifetime for some people. It's not that easy to do. It's easy to sum it up in a book, but it's very difficult to live. I think most people who are honest with themselves would agree with that. Even the most seemingly enlightened people still struggle.
Well, like you said, I envisioned it for a long time that I wanted a better life. Every time I would complete the vicious cycle of taking myself back down that bad path again, I always envisioned a better life for myself. But until I was actually ready to put in the work and I was actually ready to make that commitment, it was all just thoughts, and it was all just, like you said, an envision. It wasn't reality until I made it a reality.
Yeah. Well, we got to start somewhere, right? So we start with the fantasy of how we'd like our lives to be, and then sooner or later, I mean, you don't have any choice in the matter, man. At least not in my opinion. You got to do the work. Eventually, the body's going to drop, and the physics of that karma has to go someplace, man. So you have no choice. And if you don't do it, then life suddenly presents circumstances, whether you like it or not, that you have to. Because if you're falling back, man, then things will happen where you're given the tough love course. And some people die in the process. They have to literally die to learn the lesson. Some don't. So,
I knew my options were death or jail, at the rapid pace that I was going at, but I couldn't even imagine the road to get to either A or B, to get to the death or jail. I couldn't imagine the road that was going to lead up to that, because there's no time frame on how soon A or B could have came. So that in between, if the life was continued, I didn't want to continue that life to get to that point.
That's key, isn't it? When you lose your appetite for certain practices, you don't have to necessarily fight the addiction. It's no longer attractive. To me, that's true liberation, when you're no longer even tempted, because it's not even appealing, because you know the consequences and it doesn't even feel good anymore. There's no amount of manipulation of whatever the addiction is that works. It's like, shooting dope, drinking, sex, food, whatever. It no longer gets you high. You can't escape anymore. Nothing works. And sometimes people have their greatest realizations in those moments, or they go mad.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. So, before we exit out, I want to thank you for your time tonight and everything like that.
A pleasure.
Anybody that's out there struggling, you have any last words that you want to relate over to the audience?
I wouldn't say last words. That sounds kind of dire. I would say, they're just moments. But sometimes the moments seem to go on forever. And if you define yourself based on those moments and what you feel in those moments, be careful. Because if you wait long enough, new day comes, different moments. You go from heaven to hell, then back to heaven again within a 24-hour, 48-hour period. So don't let the moments of circumstantial stuff in life define existence. Look at it. Don't identify with it too much. Recognize, like the weather, it's there, it's affecting you, it's cold, or it's nice out. But don't define your existence based on the illusory aspect of existence, whether it's internal turbulence or external turbulence. Just sit back and look at it, and don't act. Just sit still and have the courage to breathe and forgive yourself. Even if you don't feel like you're deserving of forgiveness, you're forgiven and have the right to exist, regardless of what people think or say to you, how they define you, how you define yourself. Don't listen to any of the tapes in the catalog of memory that reduces you to something that is not deserving of love and peace and liberation or salvation, whatever your trip is.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, Robert, thank you for coming out tonight. It was a pleasure. And guys, if you liked our content tonight, please like and subscribe.